In the quiet town of Brookmere, the playground sits at the edge of a small park where children gather every afternoon. Parents trust the place. They trust the people who watch over it. But children sometimes notice things adults overlook. When several of them begin describing the same man standing silently by the fence, watching, the town dismisses their fears as imagination. After all, the man they describe resembles someone who died years ago, a loner once blamed for something terrible. The Empty Playground, a story by 10 Chapters Studio. Chapter 1, The Playground. The town of Brookmere was quieter than Helena Monroe expected. Not empty, just the kind of quiet that came from long familiarity. Small houses with neat lawns, a hardware store that probably been there for 50 years, a single cafe where everyone seemed to know each other, the sort of place where strangers were noticed immediately.
Helena stepped out of her car and closed the doors softly behind her. Across the street, the town park stretched beneath a row of tall maple trees whose leaves had already begun turning dull shades of red and copper. In the center stood a small playground, swings, a slide, a climbing frame, where half a dozen children were still playing in the fading afternoon light. For a moment, Helena simply watched. Children's laughter carried easily through the still air. Nothing about the scene looked unusual. Behind her, a car door slammed. "Miss Monroe." Helena turned. A uniformed officer was walking toward her across the parking lot, one hand raised in greeting. He was tall, early 40s maybe, with a calm face that suggested someone used to dealing with nervous parents and minor emergencies. "Officer Daniel Hart," he said when he reached her, extending his hand. "Brookmere Police Department. Thanks for coming out." Helena shook his hand. "Of course." Hart glanced toward the playground before lowering his voice slightly. "I appreciate you making the drive. I know this isn't exactly your jurisdiction." Helena gave a small shrug. "You said it might involve a child. That tends to get my attention." Hart nodded once, as if that was exactly the answer he had expected. "I spoke with Detective Gallagher in the county office," he said. "He mentioned you've helped them on a few complicated cases." "Sometimes," Helena said. Hart studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the park. "Well," he said, "I wish I could say this was something serious, but honestly, I'm not sure what we're dealing with yet." They began walking toward the playground. Parents sat on a bench near the sandbox, talking quietly while keeping an eye on their children. A boy kicked gravel under the swing set, while another attempted to climb the outside of the slide. Normal. Completely normal. "That's the problem," Hart said quietly, following Helena's gaze. "Everything looks fine." "And the concern?" Helena asked. Hart hesitated slightly. "Kids." Helena glanced at him. "3 of them came to a teacher this week," he continued. "Different ages, different families, all saying they saw the same man standing near the trees behind the playground." He nodded toward the wooded walking path at the far end of the park. Helena followed his gaze. The path ran behind a low fence, separating the playground from a line of older trees. Fallen leaves covered the ground like scattered coins. Quiet. "What did they say he was doing?" Helena asked. Hart exhaled slowly. "Watching them." Helena said nothing. "And the parents?" she asked after a moment. "They're concerned, but the thing that made it strange—" He hesitated again. Helena looked at him. "The kids all described the same person," he said. "That's not unusual." "No," Hart agreed, "but the description matches someone who used to live here." Helena stopped walking. Hart continued a few steps before realizing she had paused. "Someone you know?" Hart shook his head. "Someone who died," he said quietly. Helena waited. 10 years ago, Hart added. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A gust of wind stirred the trees above the playground. "What was his name?" Helena asked. Hart's expression tightened slightly. "Daniel Kessler." Helena turned slowly toward the wooded path again. "Tell me about him," she said. Hart looked uncomfortable. "Kessler lived a few blocks from here," he said. "People described him as odd, kept to himself, didn't really socialize. Did he come to the park?" "Apparently he used to sit on a bench back there sometimes," Hart said, pointing toward a weathered bench partly hidden beneath the trees. Helena studied it carefully. From there the entire playground would be visible. "And someone accused him of something?" she asked. Hart nodded slowly. "Years ago, a child told their parents Kessler had made them uncomfortable. Nothing specific, just rumors about inappropriate behavior." "Was it investigated?" "Briefly," Hart said, "but before anything could be proven, Kessler died in a car accident." Helena glanced at him. "And that ended the investigation." Hart looked slightly embarrassed. "Pretty much." They had reached the fence now. Beyond it, the wooded path disappeared into deeper shadow between the trees. Helena rested one hand lightly on the fence rail. For a moment she simply stood there, listening. The laughter behind her, the rustling leaves, the faint hum of distant traffic somewhere beyond the town. And beneath it all, a strange stillness she couldn't quite explain. "You see anything?" Hart asked. Helena shook her head slowly. "No." Across the playground, a small girl had stopped swinging. She was staring toward the trees. Helena noticed the tension in the child's posture immediately, the rigid shoulders, the way she held perfectly still. Helena pushed open the gate and walked across the wood chips. The girl didn't look away from the trees. Helena crouched slightly beside her. "Hi," she said gently. "What's your name?" The girl blinked, surprised. "Sophie." Helena followed her gaze toward the wooded path. "Can I ask you something, Sophie?" The girl nodded. "The man you saw, where was he standing?" Sophie lifted one small hand and pointed toward the fence. "Right there." Helena glanced back. The path was empty. "What was he doing?" Helena asked. Sophie swallowed. "Just standing." "Did he say anything?" The girl shook her head. "No." Helena kept her voice soft. "What did he look like?" Sophie thought carefully before answering. "He's tall," she said, "and he wears a dark coat." Behind Helena, Officer Hart shifted slightly. The girl's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "He was watching us." Helena felt a faint tightening in her chest. "Watching who?" she asked. Sophie looked directly at her. "All of us." Helena turned slowly back toward the trees. For a brief second she had the unsettling sensation that someone might still be standing there, just beyond the shadows where the path curved out of sight. Watching. Then Sophie spoke again. "My mum says it can't be him." Helena glanced back at the girl. "Why not?" Sophie blinked. "Because that man died." Chapter 2. The Old Story. Brookmere's police station was small enough that Helena could hear the front desk phone ring from the conference room. Officer Daniel Hart set a thin file on the table and apologized for it before Helena had even opened it. "That's all there is," he said, "at least officially." Helena pulled out a chair and sat. Officially is often the least interesting version. Hart gave a short, uncertain smile, as if he wasn't sure whether that was a joke. Outside the narrow window, dusk had begun to settle over the street. The town looked soft around the edges now, quieter than it had at the park. Helena had been in enough places like this to know how quickly quiet could become a kind of blindness. People here noticed everything until they decided they didn't want to. She opened the file.
The photograph clipped to the first page showed a man in his 40s with a thin face, pale lashes, and a guarded expression that looked less dangerous than embarrassed. Daniel Kessler. His driver's license photo had the stiff, wary look of a man who expected to be misunderstood and had grown used to it. Helena looked at the image for a long moment before turning the page. The report itself was brief, too brief. A child had told a parent that a man near the park made him feel uncomfortable. No clear allegation beyond that. No physical contact, no attempt to lure, just watching. A follow-up note said the man had been identified as Daniel Kessler, known locally as reclusive and strange. The officer had spoken to him. Kessler admitted he sometimes sat on the bench behind the playground because he liked the quiet there. Helena read that line twice. Who handled it? Hart leaned against the wall. Sergeant Michael Larkin, retired now. And this was enough for people to start warning their children away from him? Hart hesitated. Small town. A child gets scared, people fill in the rest. Helena turned another page. Accident report. County Road 6. Night. Single vehicle. Car struck a tree. Kessler pronounced dead at the scene. 2 weeks after the complaint. She looked up. That ended it. Hart nodded. Pretty much. Because people assumed the threat was gone. Or wanted to. Helena closed the file part way and rested her fingertips on it.
It wasn't only that the report was thin, it was that the emptiness around it felt shaped, like a space where other details should have been, the kind of absence created when a town reached a conclusion quickly and then lost interest in questions that complicated it. Who else was involved back then? She asked. Hart frowned slightly. In what way? In the town response, the school, parents, coaches, anyone around children. Hart thought for a moment. A lot of the same people are still here. Principal at the elementary school, some of the parents, a few teachers. There was less structure back then, though, fewer formal programs. Anyone particularly vocal? Hart gave her a look. You think somebody pushed the story? I think fear likes leadership. He was quiet for a second after that. There was a teacher, he said at last, Nancy Bell. She was one of the first adults to raise concerns, and there was a parent committee that got involved. They asked for more patrols around the park. Helena nodded. Anyone else? Hart's expression shifted, not enough to be called suspicion, only the slight inward turn of thought. There was also Tom Armitage. Who is he? Used to run maintenance for the school district. Before that, he did groundskeeping for the town, fixed fences, benches, lights, that sort of thing. Helena looked up. The park? Among other places. Still here. Lives alone near the river now, semi-retired. Helena let that sit for a moment. Maintenance men disappeared into the background of communities. They had keys, access, routines no one noticed. People forgot they were present at all. Why mention him? She asked.
Hart shrugged, though not quite casually enough. I don't know. He came up a lot in old conversations, mostly because he was always around. Set up for sports days, repaired equipment at the school. The kind of man kids knew by name. Beloved? Helena asked. Hart smiled faintly. No, more tolerated than beloved. That strangely interested her more. She reopened the file and looked again at Kessler's face. Awkward, isolated, easy to turn into a story. Do you think he did it? Hart asked. Helena did not answer immediately. I think, she said, that towns like this often remember feelings more clearly than facts. Hart folded his arms. That sounds like a no. It sounds like uncertainty. He gave her a level look. You don't like certainty. Not when it arrives too early. She stood and slid the file closed. Where to? Hart asked. Tomorrow I want to speak to the original child witness, if he'll talk. Tonight I want to see the bench again. Hart glanced toward the darkening window. In the dark, yes. He took a breath, then nodded. I'll drive. They crossed back to the park 10 minutes later. The playground was empty now, the swings moving only slightly in the wind. Without children in it, the place had lost all softness. The slide gleamed faintly under the street lamp like something abandoned. Helena walked toward the back fence and stopped near the old bench. The trees behind it were black with shadow. The path beyond curved out of sight. "Creepy enough for you?" Hart asked quietly. She ignored the question. The bench faced the playground exactly, but from here the park also disappeared into blind corners between the trees. Someone sitting here could watch the children. Someone standing just off the path could watch the bench. Helena rested a hand on the wood. It was damp and cold. Then, without warning, a brief sensation moved through her. Not a vision, not even an image, only the sharp impression of being observed from two directions at once, from the bench and from beyond it. She withdrew her hand. Hart noticed. "What is it?" "Nothing I can prove."
He glanced uneasily toward the trees. Helena stepped closer to the fence. Something metallic caught the light low to the ground near one of the posts. She crouched. A rusted hinge, recently disturbed soil around its base. "The fence was repaired," she said. Hart came up behind her, probably more than once. "Not just repaired, moved." He frowned. "How can you tell?" She pointed. The ground settled unevenly. This section was reset. Hart crouched beside her. "So?" Helena stood. "So if the fence line changed after the original complaint, then where people remember someone standing may not be where he actually stood." Hart looked back toward the bench. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but in old stories, almost nothing had a way of becoming important. As they turned back toward the parking lot, Helena looked once more into the trees. She still didn't know whether Daniel Kessler had been dangerous, but she was increasingly certain of one thing. Brookmere had remembered him too neatly, and neat memories were usually lying. At the edge of the lot, Hart's phone rang. He checked the screen. "It's dispatch." He answered, listened for a few seconds, then looked at Helena. "That little girl from the playground, Sophie." Helena's chest tightened. "What about her?" Hart lowered the phone slowly. "She says the man came back." Chapter 3. The Witness. Sophie's mother opened the door with one hand still braced against it, as if she had nearly decided not to answer at all. "I already told the officer. She's frightened enough." Helena stood slightly back on the porch, letting the woman see her face clearly before speaking. "I'm not here to push her. I'm here because children are often more accurate than adults." That made the woman pause. The house itself was modest and warm, with backpacks by the stairs and the smell of tomato sauce still lingering from dinner. Family photographs lined one wall of the hallway. In several of them, Sophie appeared with missing front teeth, solemn eyes, and the same stillness Helena had noticed at the swings. "She's upstairs," her mother said quietly. "I don't want this turned into some story." "It already is," Helena said, not unkindly. "That's part of the problem." A moment later, she was seated across from Sophie, in a bedroom scattered with stuffed animals and library books. Officer Hart remained in the hallway with the mother, giving them privacy without disappearing entirely. Helena sat in the desk chair while Sophie curled into the corner of her bed, knees pulled up beneath her. "You don't have to tell me anything fast," Helena said. "Take your time." Sophie nodded, but her grip on the blanket tightened. "You told us you saw the man again tonight." The child nodded once. "Where?" "By the trees." "The same place as before?" "Yes." Helena kept her voice calm. "Did he come closer this time?" Sophie thought. "No." "Did he say anything?" "No." "What made you sure it was the same man?" Sophie frowned in concentration. "The coat and the way he stands." Helena let that settle. Children were often much better with posture than faces.
They remembered the outline of danger. "Show me," she said gently. Sophie slid off the bed, stood in the middle of the room, and tucked her arms oddly close to her sides, chin slightly down, stillness sharpened into something watchful. Helena felt the hairs on her arms rise, not because the pose itself was frightening, but because it carried familiarity, rehearsal. Sophie had seen it more than once. "Did you see his face?" "A little." "Was it dark?" Sophie nodded. Helena waited, then asked, "Did he look old?" The girl hesitated. "No." That made Helena sit slightly straighter. "Not old like a grandfather?" she asked. Sophie shook her head. "How old then?" Sophie made a helpless face. "Like a dad."
Helena looked toward the half-open bedroom door. Hart had gone still in the hallway. "Did your mother tell you about the man who died?" Helena asked carefully. Sophie nodded. "She said people used to be scared of him a long time ago." "Did she show you a picture?" "No." "Did anyone?" Sophie thought, then shook her head again. Helena believed her. That mattered, because it meant Sophie was not simply repeating a known face, she was describing presence, shape, age, and that age did not fit the old story. "Okay," Helena said softly. "You're doing very well." Sophie climbed back onto the bed. After a moment, she said, "He wasn't looking at me." Helena frowned. "No?" The girl shook her head. "He was looking at the little kids." The room seemed to narrow around the sentence. "Which little kids?" Helena asked. Sophie's eyes drifted toward the window, as if she could see the playground from there. "The ones near the slide." Helena did not ask more. She knew when to stop. Push too hard, and the child would begin trying to please her, instead of remembering. Downstairs, Sophie's mother made tea no one really wanted. Hart stood by the kitchen counter while Helena relayed the essentials. "He wasn't old," Hart said quietly. "No. So unless Daniel Kessler rose from the dead and got younger—" "He's irrelevant for now," Helena said. Hart looked surprised. "That's not what you said earlier." "That was earlier." She leaned against the sink and thought for a moment. If Sophie was right, the current figure was not a ghost from 10 years ago, and not merely the town's old fear wearing a new face. He was a present man, active, still connected to the place somehow. Sophie's mother set down a mug too hard, tea sloshed over the rim. "Do you think someone's targeting children?" she asked. Helena met her eyes. "I think someone wants to be near them." The woman went pale. Hart stepped in quickly. "We'll increase patrols around the park." "Tomorrow won't help tonight," she snapped. Helena watched her carefully. Fear, yes, but mixed with something else. Guilt, maybe, or irritation at herself. "You knew the old story before this started," Helena said. The woman nodded stiffly. "Everyone here does." "Did your daughter hear it from you?" "Only that there used to be a man people worried about." "Did you believe that story?" Sophie's mother looked away. "I never thought much about it." That was not an answer. Helena let it pass for the moment. On the drive back, Hart kept glancing at her, as if expecting her thoughts to arrange themselves into something useful. Finally, he said, "So what now?" "Now we talk to the original witness." "Ryan Cole?" "Yes." And after that, Helena looked out the window at the dark storefronts slipping past. "After that," she said, "we find out who benefited from the town believing Daniel Kessler was the only danger." Hart was silent. That was deliberate. Not a name, not a suspect, only the shape of a question. At the station, Hart went to update the log while Helena remained in the empty conference room with the old file open again. Daniel Kessler stared up from the license photograph in his stiff, startled pose. She studied him, then turned to the complaint report. The child's unease had become a town certainty with astonishing speed. That kind of acceleration usually needed help,
someone to give fear language, someone to make a vague concern feel specific enough to spread. Not proof, not even close, but movement. Her eyes shifted to a handwritten notation near the bottom of the report she had missed before, barely legible, added after the formal statement. Child calmer after follow-up conversation with school staff. No name, no detail, just school staff. Helena sat back slowly. The room had gone very quiet, not because she had found an answer, because she had found the first real gap, and gaps, she knew, were where people hid. The door opened. Hart stepped back in. His expression changed. "What is it?" Helena asked. He held up a photocopied page from an archived school newsletter he had asked dispatch to pull from storage.
A photograph. 3 adults standing beside children at a spring sports event 10 years earlier. Hart placed it on the table. "There," he said, tapping the page. Helena looked down. At the edge of the image, partly turned away from the camera, stood a young man in a staff shirt, with one hand resting on a boy's shoulder. Ryan Cole. And next to him, smiling directly at the camera, was a handsome young coach with easy posture and practiced warmth. The caption beneath the image read, "Youth Soccer Outreach, Coach Evan Whitlock with student volunteers." Helena looked at the photo for a long moment, not because it proved anything, but because it did something worse. It made the old story suddenly larger, and somewhere inside that larger story she could feel the first real lie beginning to move. Chapter 4. The first version. Ryan Cole did not look surprised to see them. He was standing outside the garage this time, leaning against the open bay door with a cigarette between his fingers. The late afternoon light flattened everything, the road, the buildings, even his expression, into something muted and still. "Didn't think you'd come back so fast," he said, flicking ash onto the pavement. Helena stopped a few steps away. "You expected us to?" Ryan gave a small shrug. Small town, word travels. Officer Hart remained slightly behind her, quiet, letting Helena lead. "We spoke to Sophie," Helena said. Ryan nodded once, like he had already heard that too. "They all say the same thing," he said. "Guy by the trees, watching." Helena studied him. "And what do you think they saw?" Ryan hesitated. Then he took a slow drag from the cigarette. "I think kids get scared," he said, "and once one of them says something, the rest—" He trailed off. "Repeat it?" Helena asked. "Yeah." Helena didn't challenge him. Instead, she said, "Tell me about the first time you saw Daniel Kessler." Ryan's gaze drifted briefly toward the road. "I already told you," he said. "He was sitting on the bench." "Tell me again." That made him look back at her. Something in his expression tightened slightly. Not resistance exactly, but awareness. Helena held his gaze calmly. People told their stories differently the second time. Ryan exhaled through his nose. "Fine," he said. "I was at the park. I saw him sitting there. He was watching us. Doing anything else?" "No." "Did he speak to you?" "No." Helena nodded slowly. "And that made you afraid?" Ryan frowned. "I didn't say afraid." Helena said nothing. Ryan shifted his weight. "I just didn't like it," he said, "the way he looked." "How did he look?" Helena asked. Ryan's brow furrowed. "Like he was paying too much attention," he said. Helena let the silence stretch. "Was he looking at you?" she asked. Ryan opened his mouth, then paused. "I don't know," he said. That was new, Helena noticed. "Yesterday you said he was watching all of you," she said. Ryan shrugged, a little too quickly. "Yeah, that's what it felt like." Felt like, not saw. Helena took a step closer. "Ryan," she said quietly, "when you think back to that day, are you remembering what you saw or what people told you afterward?"
Ryan's jaw tightened. "I know what I saw." Helena didn't argue. Instead, she asked, "Who did you talk to first?" "My mum. And after that?" Ryan hesitated. "A few people," he said. "Who?" Ryan flicked the cigarette away and crushed it under his shoe.
"I don't remember exactly." Helena watched him. He did remember. He just wasn't sure what mattered. "That's okay," she said. "Let's try something else." Ryan crossed his arms. "What?" "Think about the park that day," Helena said. "Not Kessler, everything else. Who else was there?" Ryan blinked. "That was 10 years ago." "I know." He looked away again, thinking. "There were always people around," he said. "Parents, kids, sometimes someone from the town." "Someone from the town?" "Yeah," he said. "Like maintenance, fixing stuff." Helena felt something shift slightly. "Do you remember anyone specific?" she asked. Ryan frowned. "There was this guy," he said slowly. "Always around. Older." "Name?" Ryan shook his head. "I don't know. He worked for the town. Fixed things." "Where was he that day?" Ryan hesitated. "I think near the fence," he said. Helena glanced briefly at Hart. "Near the trees?" she asked. "Yeah." "Doing what?" Ryan shrugged. "I don't know. Just there." "Was he watching the kids?" Ryan frowned again, uncertain. "Maybe," he said. "I didn't really pay attention." Helena nodded. Of course he hadn't. Children didn't notice people who belonged. "Did anyone talk to you about him afterward?" she asked. Ryan shook his head. "No." "Only about Kessler?" "Yeah." Helena stepped back slightly. "And after that, Kessler became the problem?" Ryan nodded. "Pretty much." Silence stretched between them. Then Helena asked, "Do you remember anyone asking you questions about what you saw?" Ryan looked at her again. "Yeah," he said slowly. "People asked." "Anyone in particular?" Ryan hesitated. The uncertainty returned, but this time it felt different. Less avoidance, more like something trying to surface. "There was," he started, then stopped. Helena waited. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "There was someone from the school," he said.
Helena didn't react. "Teacher?" she asked. "I think so." "Male or female?" Ryan frowned. "I don't remember." That bothered him. Helena could see it. "What did they ask you?" she said. Ryan exhaled slowly. "Just what I saw," he said. "How it made me feel." "Did they help you describe it?" Ryan looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "Did they suggest things?" Helena asked. "Words, details, ways of understanding it." Ryan hesitated again. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Then it was gone. "I don't know," he said. Helena held his gaze. "You're not sure?" Ryan shook his head. "No." Helena nodded once. "That's okay." She stepped back. For now, that was enough. As she turned, Ryan spoke again. "There was something else." Helena stopped. "What?" Ryan looked uneasy. "I remember thinking it wasn't just him," he said. Helena turned back slowly. "What do you mean?" Ryan shook his head. "I don't know," he said quickly. "It's just a feeling, like there were other people around, but everyone only talked about him." Helena studied him. "Do you think that feeling was wrong?" she asked. Ryan didn't answer. That was answer enough. Back in the car, Hart started the engine, but didn't pull away. "Well," he said. Helena looked out at the quiet street. "He didn't lie," she said. Hart frowned. "That's good, right?" "He didn't lie," Helena repeated, "but he also didn't remember clearly." Hart leaned back slightly. "So we're working with a memory that's been shaped." "Yes. And now we've got some maintenance guy near the fence that no one ever looked at." "Maybe," Helena said. Hart glanced at her. "You don't sound convinced." "I'm not."
"Why not?"
Helena rested her elbow against the window. "Because that's too easy," she said. Hart gave a short laugh. "You think we're chasing the wrong person?" "I think," Helena said slowly, "that we're seeing the edges of a story that was simplified." Hart was quiet. "And the real version?" he asked. Helena's eyes drifted back toward the direction of the park. "The real version," she said, "is usually more complicated and much harder to see." Hart nodded once, then finally pulled the car onto the road. As they drove, Helena felt the shape of the investigation shift slightly. Kessler, a vague accusation, a quick conclusion, a dead man, and now a second presence, unnoticed, unquestioned, or simply forgotten. For the first time since arriving in Brookmere, Helena felt something close to certainty, not about who was responsible, but about something just as important. The town had been looking in the wrong direction for a very long time. Chapter 5. The Woman Who Spoke First. Nancy Bell's house stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind where hedges were trimmed evenly and wind chimes marked the passing of time more than clocks did. Helena noticed the details before she even reached the door. 2 chairs on the porch, positioned side by side but angled slightly outward, for conversation, not intimacy. A stack of neatly folded newspapers on a small table, a row of potted plants carefully maintained. Order, control. The door opened before Helena could knock a second time. "You must be Miss Monroe," the woman said. Nancy Bell was in her late 60s, her silver hair pulled back neatly, her posture straight in a way that suggested habit rather than effort. "I'm Officer Hart," he added behind Helena. "Yes," Nancy said, already stepping aside. "I was told you might come." Helena stepped inside. The house was quiet, tidy, and faintly scented with lavender. Bookshelves lined the walls, children's books mixed with teaching materials, some of them worn from years of use. "You were a teacher," Helena said. Nancy smiled faintly. "For a long time." They sat in the living room. Nancy folded her hands in her lap, waiting. Helena let a moment pass before speaking. "We're looking into the situation at the playground," she said. "We understand you were involved when concerns were first raised about Daniel Kessler." Nancy's expression shifted, not defensively but inward. "Yes," she said. "I remember that time very clearly." Helena watched her carefully. "Tell me what you remember." Nancy nodded once, as if she had been expecting the question. "A child came to school upset, quiet at first, but it became clear something was wrong. Eventually, he said there was a man at the park who made him uncomfortable." "Ryan Cole," Helena said. Nancy inclined her head. "Yes." "What did he say exactly?" Nancy paused. "That's the difficult part," she said. "He didn't say anything specific, just that the man watched them, that it felt wrong." Helena didn't interrupt. "And that was enough?" Helena asked after a moment. Nancy met her eyes. "At that age, children don't always have the language to explain discomfort," she said. "But that doesn't mean the discomfort isn't real." "I agree," Helena said, "but discomfort can have many sources." Nancy's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. "Yes," she said, "it can." Helena leaned back slightly. "What did you do next?" "I spoke with his parents," Nancy said, "encouraged them to report it." "And you spoke to Ryan again?" Nancy hesitated. "Yes," Helena noticed. "What did you ask him?" Nancy's gaze drifted briefly toward the window. "I asked him to describe what he saw." "Did you help him describe it?" Nancy looked back at her. "I helped him feel safe enough to speak." "That's not the same thing," Helena said quietly. Silence settled in the room. Hart shifted slightly beside her but said nothing. Nancy inhaled slowly. "When a child is frightened, they often need guidance to articulate what's wrong." Helena nodded. "And what did he say once he had that guidance?" Nancy's lips pressed together briefly. "That the man watched the children for long periods," she said.
That he stood or sat where he could see everything. Helena tilted her head slightly. Did he say that before, she asked, or after your conversation? Nancy didn't answer immediately. Helena let the silence stretch. Finally, Nancy said, I don't remember the exact sequence. Helena held her gaze. You don't remember, she repeated. Nancy's composure slipped, just slightly. It was a long time ago, she said. Helena nodded slowly. Yes, she said, but you remember it clearly. That landed. Nancy looked away again. Helena changed direction. Was anyone else involved in speaking to Ryan? She asked. Nancy exhaled quietly. There were others, she said, people in the community who worked with the children. Such as... Nancy hesitated. Helena waited. Finally, she said, coaches, volunteers. Names, Helena said gently. Nancy's eyes flicked back to her. Why does that matter now? She asked. Because the situation at the playground is happening again, Helena said. Nancy stilled. Helena watched the reaction closely. This time it wasn't controlled. It was real. They said that? Nancy asked quietly. Yes. Nancy's fingers tightened again. For how long? A few days. Nancy leaned back slowly. That shouldn't be possible, she said. Helena didn't respond. Instead, she said, You mentioned coaches. Nancy nodded. Yes. Was there a particular coach who spoke with Ryan? Nancy's expression shifted again, more guarded now. There was a young man working with the children at the time, she said. Name? Nancy hesitated. Helena didn't push. After a moment, Nancy said, Evan Whitlock. Hart glanced at Helena. She didn't look at him. What was his role? Helena asked. Youth soccer, Nancy said. After-school programs. He was new in town then. Did he speak to Ryan? Nancy nodded slowly. I believe so. About the incident? Yes. Helena leaned forward slightly. Do you remember what he said to him? Nancy shook her head. No. But this time Helena wasn't sure she believed her. Do you remember anything about how he responded to the situation? Helena asked. Nancy hesitated. He was concerned, she said. How so? He took it seriously, Nancy said. More than some others did. Helena absorbed that. More than some others, not less. That mattered. Did you trust him? She asked. Nancy looked at her directly. Yes. The answer came too quickly. Helena noted it. And now? She asked. Nancy didn't answer. The silence stretched longer this time. Then Nancy said quietly, I trusted a lot of things back then. Helena let that sit. She stood a moment later. Thank you, she said. Nancy nodded, but her eyes had shifted, no longer steady, no longer certain. As Helena and Hart stepped back outside, the air felt cooler than before. Hart waited until they reached the car. Well, he asked. Helena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked back at the house, the woman who had helped shape the original story. Carefully, perhaps too carefully. She believed she was protecting a child, Helena said. Hart nodded. Sounds like it. Helena's gaze drifted toward the street. Or, she added quietly, she helped create a version of events that made sense to her. Hart frowned. You think she got it wrong? I think, Helena said, that once a story starts to form, people don't always realize how much they're shaping it. Hart leaned against the car. So now we've got Kessler, a maintenance guy near the fence, and a coach who talked to the kid. Helena opened the car door. And a teacher who helped define the problem, she said. Hart let out a slow breath. That's a lot of directions. Yes. Helena paused before getting in. That's what makes it interesting. Hart gave a short, uneasy laugh. Or complicated. Helena met his eyes. They're the same thing. As they drove away, Helena looked out the window at the quiet houses lining the street. The past in Brookmere wasn't hidden, it was remembered, just not correctly. And somewhere between what people believed and what actually happened, Someone had found the perfect place to disappear.
Chapter 6. The Man Who Fixed Things. Tom Armitage's house sat closer to the river than the rest of Brookmere, where the town began to thin into gravel roads and uneven fences. The yard was cluttered but not neglected, tools stacked neatly under a tarp, a ladder resting against the side of the house, a coil of wire hung carefully on a hook. Not careless, practical. Helena noticed that immediately. "Doesn't look like someone hiding anything," Hart muttered as they stepped out of the car. Helena didn't respond. People who hid things often didn't look like they did. She knocked once. It took a moment, then the door opened. Tom Armitage stood there, taller than Helena expected, his frame still solid despite his age, late 60s, maybe early 70s. His hands were rough, nails worn down, the skin marked with years of work. His eyes moved from Helena to Hart. "Police," he said flatly. "Officer Hart," Hart said. "This is Helena Monroe." Armitage nodded once. "What's this about?" "The park," Helena said. That was enough. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not exactly fear, but recognition. He stepped back. "Come in." Inside, the house smelt faintly of sawdust and metal. A workbench took up most of the main room, covered in neatly arranged tools. Everything had a place. Helena's gaze moved slowly across the space. Order again. Different from Nancy Bell's, less controlled, more functional. "You worked maintenance for the town," Helena said. Armitage didn't look at her. "Still do sometimes." "And the school?" "Yeah." "And the park?" That made him glance up, among other places. Helena stepped closer to the workbench. "You would have had access to the playground regularly." Armitage shrugged. "If something broke, I fixed it." Hart stayed near the door, watching. Helena picked up a small metal hinge from the edge of the table, old, rusted, similar to the one she had seen at the fence. "You replaced parts of the fence," she said. "Over the years," Armitage replied. 10 years ago?" He hesitated. "Probably." Helena set the hinge down. "Do you remember Daniel Kessler?" Armitage's jaw tightened slightly. "Yeah." "What do you remember?" Armitage leaned back against the counter. "People didn't like him," he said. "Why?" "He watched things," Armitage said. "Didn't talk much. Made people uncomfortable." Helena tilted her head. "Did he ever do anything?" Armitage didn't answer right away. "No," he said finally. "Did you ever speak to him?" she asked. Armitage shook his head. "No need." "No need?" "He kept to himself," Armitage said. "I kept to mine." Helena stepped a little closer. "You were often near the playground," she said. "Did you ever see him there?" Armitage nodded once. "Sometimes." "Doing what?" "Sitting. Watching." "From the bench?" "Usually." "Always?" Armitage hesitated. "Yeah," he said. Helena didn't challenge him directly. Instead, she asked, "Were you ever near the fence when children were playing?" Armitage frowned. "I worked there. Of course I was near the fence." "While children were present?" "Sometimes."
Helena let the silence stretch. "Did anyone ever mention you made them uncomfortable?" she asked. Hart shifted slightly behind her. Armitage's eyes snapped to hers. "No." The answer was sharp. Too sharp. Helena held his gaze. "Not even a child?" "No." His voice was firmer now, defensive. Helena nodded slowly. "Do you remember the day the complaint was made about Kessler?" Armitage looked away. "No." "You were working in the park around that time. I worked there a lot of times. Do you remember that specific day?" "No." Helena studied him. His answers weren't lies, they were refusals, subtle, controlled. "After the complaint," she said, "the fence was adjusted." Armitage glanced back at her. "Repairs happen." "This wasn't just a repair," Helena said. "The line shifted." Armitage didn't respond. Helena stepped toward the window, looking out at the yard. "If the fence moved," she said, quietly, "then where people remember someone standing might not be where they actually stood." Silence. Behind her, Hart exhaled slowly. Armitage said nothing. Helena turned back. "You were there,"
she said. Not a question, a statement. Armitage's face remained still. Lots of people were there, he said. Helena nodded. That's true. She stepped away from him. Thank you for your time, she said. Hart looked slightly surprised, but followed her toward the door. As they stepped outside, the air felt colder than before. Hart waited until they reached the car. Well, he asked. Helena didn't answer immediately. She looked back at the house. Tom Armitage stood just inside the doorway, watching them leave, still, controlled. Do you think it's him? Hart asked. Helena shook her head slowly. I think he's hiding something, she said. Hart frowned. That sounds like a yes. It's not, Helena said. She turned back to the car. He's defensive. He avoids specifics. He doesn't want to be connected to that day. Hart crossed his arms, which is suspicious.
Yes. Helena paused before getting in. But it's also what happens when someone has been questioned before, or blamed before, or simply doesn't trust the process. Hart considered that. So he could just be difficult. Or protecting himself, Helena said. From what? Helena met his eyes. From being pulled into a story that already went wrong once. Hart was quiet. They got into the car. As Hart started the engine, Helena looked back one last time. Armitage was still standing in the doorway, watching. For a brief moment, Helena felt that same faint, unsettling sensation again, of being observed, but this time it didn't feel like it was coming from him. As they drove back toward town, the sky had darkened completely. Streetlights flickered on one by one. Where does that leave us? Hart asked. Helena rested her head lightly against the window. With too many possibilities, she said. Kessler might have been innocent. Yes. Armitage might be hiding something. Yes. And the kids are seeing someone now. Yes. Hart exhaled. That's not helpful. Helena's gaze drifted to the passing houses. No, she said quietly. It's exactly what we need. Hart glanced at her. How? Because it means the story we were given, she said, is incomplete. Hart nodded slowly. And Whitlock. Helena didn't answer right away. The name lingered, not as a solution, not yet, just part of the landscape. A respected man, she said finally, in a position of trust. Hart raised an eyebrow. You don't sound convinced. I'm not ready to be, Helena said. She closed her eyes briefly. In her mind, the playground returned, the bench, the fence, the trees, and something else, a feeling, not tied to one person, not yet, but present, watching, waiting, patient. Helena opened her eyes. Tomorrow, she said, we go back to the beginning. Hart frowned. We've been doing that. No, Helena said quietly. We've been following the version of the beginning that the town remembers. She turned to look at him. Now we find out what actually happened. Chapter 7. The Second Story. The elementary school still carried the same low hum Helena had heard in 100 other places. Voices behind closed doors, footsteps in hallways, the distant scrape of chairs, structured noise, contained, safe on the surface. Principal Marianne Eade met them at the front office with a firm handshake and a practiced smile. Officer Hart, Miss Monroe, I understand this is about the playground situation. Her tone was calm, but her eyes flickered briefly toward the hallway behind them, as if checking who might be listening. Yes, Hart said, we're trying to understand if there's any connection to what happened here years ago. Eade nodded once. I expected that. Helena noticed the phrasing. Expected, not surprised. They moved into her office, clean, organized, diplomas on the wall, a framed photograph of a school sports day sat on her desk, children lined up in bright jerseys, adults standing behind them, smiling. Helena's eyes lingered on it for a second too long.
Miss Bell told us you were here when the original concerns were raised. I was vice principal then, Ede replied. Yes. And ye remember it clearly. Ede folded her hands, as clearly as one remembers anything from that long ago. Helena sat opposite her. Tell me your version, she said. Ede's expression tightened slightly. My version? Yes. Ede leaned back a fraction. A child reported feeling uncomfortable around a man at the park, she said. The concern was taken seriously. The police were contacted. The man died shortly afterward. That's the official version, Helena said. Ede held her gaze. It's also the accurate one. Helena tilted her head slightly. Accurate doesn't always mean complete. Silence. Ide's fingers tightened slightly on the desk. What exactly are you suggesting? She asked. I'm asking, Helena said calmly, whether there were details at the time that didn't make it into the official record. Ide looked toward the window. For a moment, Helena thought she might refuse. Then, there was confusion, Ide said. Helena didn't interrupt. The child was upset, but not specific. That left room for interpretation. Whose interpretation? Helena asked. Ide hesitated. Adults, she said. Which adults? Ide's gaze returned to Helena. Teachers, parents, community members. Helena leaned forward slightly. Anyone in particular who shaped that interpretation? Ide didn't answer immediately. Then she said, Nancy Bell was the first to raise concern formally. We spoke to her. Ide nodded. She believed she was doing the right thing, she said. I believe that too, Helena said, but belief doesn't always lead to accuracy. Ide's lips pressed together. No, she said quietly, it doesn't. Helena let that settle. Then, was anyone else speaking directly with the child? She asked. Ide hesitated. Yes. Who?
Several people checked in with him, she said. That's what happens in a situation like that. Names. Ida looked at her. You're being very direct. Yes. Another pause. Then, Evan Whitlock, Ida said. Hart glanced at Helena again. She remained still. What was his role at the time? Helena asked. He had just started working with the youth programs, coaching, after-school activities. He was well liked. Parents trusted him. Did you trust him? Yes. Again, too quickly. Helena noticed. Did he speak to the child alone? She asked. Ida hesitated. I believe so, she said. More than once? I don't know. Helena watched her carefully. You do, she said quietly. Ida's composure slipped, just slightly. I didn't monitor every interaction, she said. No, Ida agreed, but you remember enough to know this mattered. Ida looked down at her desk. For a moment, Helena thought she might stop talking. Instead, she said, He was very engaged. Helena didn't react. What does that mean? She asked. Ide searched for the word. Invested, she said finally. He wanted to help the child feel understood. Helena held her gaze. Or help him understand what he felt, she said. Ide didn't answer. That was enough. Helena leaned back. After the complaint, how quickly did the town settle on Kessler? She asked. Ide frowned slightly. It didn't feel fast at the time. But looking back, Ide hesitated. Faster than it should have, she admitted. Why? Ide's eyes flickered again, not toward Helena this time, but toward the photograph on her desk. The town already saw him a certain way, she said. Strange, isolated, watching children. Yes. So the story fit? Ide nodded. Helena followed her gaze to the photograph. Children in bright uniforms, adults behind them. Helena stood. May I? She asked, gesturing toward the frame. Ide nodded. Helena picked it up. It was from about 10 years ago, the colours slightly faded, the print worn at the edges. Her eyes moved slowly across the image. Children, parents, staff. Then she saw him, younger, relaxed, one hand resting lightly on a child's shoulder, Evan Whitlock. Beside him, slightly out of focus, stood another figure near the edge of the frame, older, holding a toolbox, Tom Armitage. Helena felt something shift, not clarity, not yet, but connection. She set the photograph back down. "These events overlap more than people remember," she said quietly. I didn't respond. Helena turned back toward her. "One more question," she said. I'd nodded. "When the original concern was raised, did anyone suggest that Kessler might not be the only person to look at?" Ide's face went still. "No," she said. The answer came too quickly, too clean. Helena held her gaze. "Not even briefly?" she asked. Ide shook her head. "No." Helena nodded once. "Thank you." Outside, the hallway noise returned around them, lockers closing, voices rising and falling, the ordinary rhythm of a school day ending. Hart waited until they reached the car. "That felt different," he said. "Yes," Helena said. "How?" "She knows more than she said." Hart looked at her. "About Whitlock. About the situation," Helena corrected. Hart leaned against the car. "You're still not ready to point at him." "No." "Even after that?" Helena looked back at the school. "I'm ready to say he was close to the center of it," she said. "That's not the same thing." "No." Hart exhaled. "Then what are we missing?" Helena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she replayed the image in her mind. The photograph, Whitlock, Armitage, children, all in the same place, at the same time, 10 years ago, and now the same place again. "Memory," she said finally. Hart looked at her. "What about it?" Helena met his eyes. "We're still relying on it," she said. Hart frowned. "That's all we've got." Helena shook her head. "No," she said. "It's what everyone else has been relying on." She opened the car door. "We need something that wasn't interpreted," she added. Hart paused. "Like what?" Helena looked at him. "Something that was recorded before anyone decided what it meant." Hart straightened slightly. "Records," Helena nodded. "School logs, maintenance reports, anything that places people exactly where they were." Hart gave a short, determined nod. "I can pull archives." "Do that." He moved toward the driver's side, then stopped. "And in the meantime," Helena glanced once more at the school. Children were spilling out now, laughing, running, free in the way only children could be. "We go back to the park," she said. Again, "Yes." "Why?" Helena's gaze drifted toward the tree line beyond the playground. "Because someone else already has."
Chapter 8. The Record. The maintenance office sat behind the school gym, a narrow room with metal shelving, stacked boxes, and the faint smell of dust and paper that hadn't been moved in years. Hart unlocked the door with a key borrowed from the district clerk. "This is everything they didn't throw out," he said. Helena stepped inside. Boxes were labeled in faded marker. Field repairs, equipment logs, work orders. Not memory. Not interpretation, just what had been done, when, and by whom. "This is better," Helena said. Hart pulled a box onto a table and opened it. Inside were folders, loosely organized by year. 10 years back?" he asked. "Yes." They worked in silence at first. Paper shifted, pages turned, dates skimmed. Helena moved slowly, not searching for something obvious, but for anything that didn't quite belong. Patterns first, then breaks in patterns. After several minutes, Hart spoke. "Fence repair," he said, holding up a sheet. "Playground perimeter, same month as the complaint." Helena stepped closer. "Date?" Hart read it. 3 days after the report was filed. Helena nodded. "Who signed it?" Hart looked confused. "It just says completed, no name." "That's unusual." For older records, not always, Hart said, but there's usually at least an initial. Helena took the paper. The description was brief. Realignment of fence section near wooded path. Realignment, not repair. She set it aside. Keep going, she said. Hart flipped through another stack. Here, he said a moment later. Lighting check, same week. Helena glanced over. Any issues? Notes say, visibility reduced near tree line. She looked up. Before or after the fence was moved? Hart scanned the date. Before. Helena nodded slowly. So the fence was adjusted after someone noted poor visibility. Hart leaned back slightly. That could be normal. Yes, Helena said, or intentional. Hart didn't answer. She continued through the files. Routine maintenance, equipment checks, seasonal repairs. Then something else. A thin, nearly empty folder, no label. She opened it. Inside were 2 loose pages. The first was a general note, unsigned. Follow-up conversation with student regarding playground concern. Child calmer after discussion. Will monitor. Helena's eyes moved slowly across the lines. No name, no role, no detail. The second page was different, a printed activity roster for the youth program that week, names of children, volunteers, staff. Helena scanned it, and then stopped. One name appeared more than once across different sections. E. Whitlock, coach, after-school supervisor, field coordinator, present every day that week. She didn't react, not yet. Instead, she looked for other names. There, near the bottom, T. Armitage, maintenance, on-site, multiple entries, same days, same time window. Helena placed the page flat on the table. Hart stepped closer. What is it? Overlap, she said. He leaned in. Whitlock and Armitage? Yes. That just means they were both there. Yes. Helena tapped the page lightly, but not how often. Hart looked again. Whitlock, daily. Armitage, frequent. Same hours, same location, same week the complaint was made. Hart straightened slowly. That's a lot of presence. Helena nodded. And yet only one person became the story. Hart crossed his arms. Kessler. Hart exhaled. Still doesn't tell us who's responsible. No, Helena said, but it tells us the story narrowed too quickly. She gathered the pages. Let's go. The park was darker now than Helena had seen it before. The streetlights cast uneven pools of light across the playground, leaving the trees beyond the fence in shadow. Hart parked near the entrance. You think he'll come back tonight? He asked. I think, Helena said, stepping out, that if someone has been returning here, they've chosen a pattern. Hart followed her, and the pattern is familiarity. They walked toward the fence. The playground was empty, silent. Helena stopped near the bench, the same place, the same angle. She turned slowly, mapping it in her mind. From here you could see the entire playground, but if you stepped just slightly. She moved a few feet to the left. The shadows deepened. The fence line shifted. Now the bench was partially obscured, and the path behind it opened into a darker corridor between trees. Here, she said quietly. Hart stepped beside her. This spot, she continued, you can watch without being seen clearly. Hart looked around, and the kids wouldn't notice the difference. They'd remember the presence, Helena said, not the exact position. Hart exhaled slowly. So Kessler could have been on the bench and someone else. In the shadows, Helena finished. They stood in silence. The trees moved softly in the wind. Then, a faint sound. Hart turned. You hear that? Helena had already shifted her gaze. Movement, near the fence. Low, quick. She stepped forward. Hello? Hart called. No answer. Helena moved faster now, rounding the edge of the fence toward the tree line. The path was empty, but something had been there. She could feel it. A presence just gone. Hart reached her. Someone ran, he said. Helena crouched. The ground was soft from recent rain, and there, a partial footprint, fresh. Hart leaned down beside her. "Size?" he asked. Helena didn't answer immediately. She studied it. Adult, not large, not old. She stood slowly. Hart followed her gaze. The path disappeared deeper into darkness. "You think that was him?" he asked. Helena's voice was quiet. "I think," she said, "we're no longer dealing with a memory." Hart nodded once. "Then we need patrols out here tonight." "Yes," Helena said. But her attention had shifted back toward the playground, specifically the slide. She walked toward it. Hart followed. "What is it?" he asked. Helena stopped at the base. There, tucked just beneath the edge of the structure, something small. Paper. She crouched and picked it up. A torn piece of notebook page, folded once. Hart leaned closer. "What is that?" Helena unfolded it carefully.
Handwritten, simple, uneven, a child's writing. She read it once, then again. Hart waited. "What does it say?" he asked. Helena looked up. Her expression had changed. "It's a name," she said. "What name?" Helena held the paper out. He took it, read it, and went still. Because the name wasn't Kessler, and it wasn't Armitage. It was one they already knew. Evan Whitlock.
Chapter 9. The Place He Stands.
The note sat between them on the table back at the station. Hart had read it 3 times already, as if repetition might change what it said. It didn't. Evan Whitlock, written in uneven, careful letters. "Could be nothing," Hart said finally. "Kids write names all the time." Helena didn't answer immediately. She was looking at the paper differently now, not just at the name, but at how it had been written. Deliberate, not scribbled, not casual. "Where exactly did you find it?" Hart asked. "Under the slide," Helena said. "Tucked in, not dropped." Hart looked away. "So someone put it there?" "Yes." "Why?" Helena looked up. "Either to leave a message," she said, "or to hide one." Hart leaned back in his chair. "That's a big jump." "Yes," Helena said, "which is why we don't rely on it." She reached for the note and folded it again. "One data point, not a conclusion." Hart nodded slowly. "Good," he said, "because if we walk in accusing Whitlock based on that—" "We won't," Helena said. Silence settled for a moment. Then Hart stood. "I'll pull patrol logs, see if anyone's seen him near the park at night." Helena nodded. "I'm going back out." Hart stopped. "Alone?" "Yes." He hesitated. Then, "Call me if anything feels off." Helena gave a faint smile. "It already does." The park was darker now. Not just evening dark, but the deeper quiet that came after the town had settled completely. No cars passing, no distant voices, just wind through the trees and the occasional creak of metal from the swings. Helena walked to the fence without turning on a flashlight. She wanted her eyes to adjust, to see what a child would see. Shapes, movement, presence. She stopped near the bench, the same place Kessler had been remembered, the same place everyone had focused on. She turned slowly, then stepped away from it, to the left, into the shadow line, the place she had stood earlier, and waited. Minutes passed. Nothing moved, but the feeling returned. Not a vision, not an image, a pressure, as if the space itself held memory. She closed her eyes briefly and let it come. Children's voices, laughter, a whistle, movement. Not from the bench, from here, just beyond the fence. Watching, not alone, another presence. Closer to the children, moving between them, speaking. Helena opened her eyes. The playground was empty again, but the feeling lingered. 2 positions, 2 roles, the watcher and the one who could approach. Her gaze shifted slowly across the park, the bench, the fence, the play structure, the path. Then it settled on something she hadn't fully considered before: access. Not who could watch, who could move freely. She turned and walked the perimeter, past the gate, around the edge, toward the side path that led back toward the school. No lock, no barrier, a direct line from school grounds to playground, unnoticed. She stopped and turned back. If someone worked with children, they wouldn't need to stand at the edge. They could already be inside. The thought settled heavily, and with it, the shape of the truth began to form, not fully, but enough.
The next morning, Helena didn't go to the station. She went to the school, early, before classes started. The parking lot was half empty. Teachers arriving, staff unlocking doors. Routine. She walked in without hesitation. No one stopped her. Familiarity again. She found him near the gym. Evan Whitlock stood with a clipboard in hand, speaking to a group of children about an upcoming activity. His voice was warm, confident, easy. The children listened. Some smiled. One laughed. Whitlock smiled back.
Helena watched from a distance. Not his words, his attention. It moved easily across the group, but every so often it paused, just slightly, on the youngest, on the quietest, on the ones not speaking. She stepped forward. "Mr. Whitlock." He turned immediately and smiled, open, untroubled. "Yes." His eyes flicked briefly to her face, assessing, not recognizing. "Good." "I'm Helena Monroe," she said. "I'm helping the police with the situation at the park." "Of course," he said smoothly. "I heard about that. Terrible thing to frighten children." His tone was exactly right, concerned, measured. Helena nodded. "I was hoping to ask you a few questions." "Absolutely." He handed the clipboard to another staff member without hesitation. "Give me a moment," he told them, then turned back to Helena. "Shall we?" They moved down the hallway, quiet now, controlled. Helena walked beside him. "Were you working here 10 years ago?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I had just started." "You remember the situation with Daniel Kessler?" A small pause. "Vaguely," he said. Helena glanced at him. "Not clearly." He smiled faintly. "It was a long time ago." "Yes," Helena said. They stopped near an empty classroom. "You worked closely with the children," she continued. "I did." "You spoke to Ryan Cole?" Whitlock nodded. "I may have," he said. "I spoke to many children." Helena watched him carefully. "Do you remember what he told you?" Whitlock tilted his head slightly. "That he was uncomfortable," he said. "That's all I recall." Helena let the silence stretch. "And how did you respond?" Whitlock's expression didn't change. "I reassured him," he said, "encouraged him to speak to trusted adults." "Did you ask him questions?" "Of course." "What kind?" Whitlock smiled slightly. "The kind you ask a child to understand what they're feeling." Helena nodded. "And did you help him define those feelings?" Whitlock's eyes met hers. "Isn't that part of helping?" he said. Helena held his gaze. "For some people," she said. Another pause, subtle, measured. Then Whitlock smiled again. "Is there something you're concerned about, Miss Monroe?" Helena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she said, "Children at the park have started describing a man watching them again." Whitlock's expression shifted, just slightly. Concern. Appropriate. "When did this start?" he asked. "A few days ago." Whitlock nodded. "That's troubling." "Yes," Helena said. Silence. "You work closely with children," she continued. "Have any of them mentioned this to you?" Whitlock shook his head. "No." Helena studied him. "None?" "None." The answer came easily, too easily. Helena nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. Whitlock smiled again. "Of course."
She turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing," she said. Whitlock rated. Helena looked at him. "Do you ever go to the park in the evenings?" A fraction of a pause, barely visible. "No," he said. Helena held his gaze, then nodded. "Thank you for your time." She walked away, steady, unhurried. Behind her she could feel his attention linger, watching. Outside, the morning had fully settled into day. Children were arriving, parents talking. The same rhythm as before. But now Helena saw it differently, not as a place of safety, as a system of trust, and someone inside it, using that trust. She reached her car and paused. The pieces were there now. Not proof, not yet, but pattern. 2 roles, the watcher and the trusted one, and only one person fit both, over time. Helena opened the car door. For the first time since arriving in Brookmere, she knew what the final question would be. Not who had been blamed, not who had been seen, but who had been believed, and why.
Chapter 10. What was believed. Helena didn't go back to the station right away. She sat in the car outside the school, engine off, watching parents drop off their children. Doors opening, voices calling, backpacks slung over shoulders. Normal. Always normal. That was the problem. She took out the folded note again. Evan Whitlock. A child had written it, not hidden randomly, placed, left. Not a statement, a signal. Helena unfolded it slowly, studying the letters again. Careful, deliberate. Children didn't write names like this unless they meant them. She reached for her phone. "Hart," she said when he picked up, "I need you at the school." They stood in the hallway again 20 minutes later. Hart looked between her and the classrooms. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. "No," Helena said. That stopped him. "But I'm sure enough." Hart nodded once. "What's the plan?" Helena glanced down the corridor. "Not confrontation," she said. "Not yet." "So what are we doing?" "We're changing the story." Hart looked at her. "What does that mean?" Helena didn't answer directly. Instead, she stepped toward the main office. "Call him in," she said.
Evan Whitlock arrived 5 minutes later. Same calm walk, same easy smile. He looked between Helena and Hart. "This seems more serious," he said lightly. Helena gestured toward a chair. "Please." He sat, relaxed, controlled. Hart remained standing. Helena placed the folded note on the table between them. Whitlock's eyes dropped to it, briefly, then back to her. "What's this?" he asked. Helena didn't answer. Instead, she said, "We've been reviewing the original case." Whitlock nodded slowly. "I understand." Helena leaned forward slightly. "The problem with that case," she continued, "is that it resolved too quickly." Whitlock's expression remained steady. "Sometimes that happens," he said. "Yes," Helena agreed, "especially when people want it to." Silence.
Whitlock didn't move. Helena let the quiet stretch. Then, "The child wasn't specific," she said, "but the adults were." Whitlock's eyes flickered, just slightly. "Interpretation," he said. "Yes," Helena nodded. "And once a story begins to form, it becomes easier to follow it than to question it." Whitlock said nothing. Helena watched him. "You spoke to that child," she said. "I may have," Whitlock replied. "You asked questions." "Yes." "You helped him describe what he felt." Whitlock met her gaze. "I helped him feel safe." Helena nodded slowly. "And in doing so," she said, "you gave his fear a shape." Silence. Whitlock leaned back slightly. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "It's an observation," Helena replied. Hart shifted beside them. Whitlock glanced briefly at him, then back to Helena. "And what does that observation lead to?" he asked. Helena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she said, "We found records." Whitlock's posture remained relaxed. Maintenance logs, school notes, activity rosters. Still nothing. Helena placed a second sheet on the table. The roster. Whitlock's name, repeated, present, every day. "You were there," she said. Whitlock gave a faint smile. "I worked there."
Yes. Helena leaned forward slightly, and so did someone else. She let that sit. "Tom Armitage," she said. Whitlock's expression didn't change, but something in the room did. A subtle shift. Hart noticed it. Helena continued. "He was near the fence," she said, often, unnoticed, in the background. Whitlock said nothing. Helena watched him carefully. "You could have pointed to him," she said quietly. A pause, barely visible. "But you didn't." Whitlock's smile returned. "Why would I?" Helena held his gaze. "Because it would have been easy," she said. Silence. Whitlock didn't respond. Helena leaned back. "Instead," she said, "the story focused on someone else." "Kessler," Hart said quietly. Whitlock glanced at him. "Yes," he said. Helena nodded. "A man already seen as strange," she said. "A man who didn't defend himself well. A man who died before anyone had to reconsider." Whitlock's expression remained calm. "You're building a theory," he said. Helena met his eyes. "Yes."
Helena didn't answer directly. Instead, she picked up the note, unfolded it, and turned it toward him. Whitlock looked down, just for a second. That was all it took, because this time his reaction came too quickly, too controlled. Recognition followed immediately by dismissal. "A child's writing," he said. "Yes," Helena's voice was quiet. "Children notice things." Whitlock smiled faintly. "They also imagine things." Helena didn't respond. Instead, she said, "The child who wrote this didn't describe an old man." Whitlock's eyes lifted. "They described someone in their 30s, maybe 40s. Silence. Hart felt it now, the shift, the narrowing. Helena continued. "They described posture," she said, "presence, attention." Whitlock said nothing. "They described someone who belongs in that space," she added. A pause. Then, "someone trusted." The word landed. Whitlock leaned back. For the first time, his smile didn't return immediately. "That's a dangerous line of thinking," he said. "Yes," Helena said. "It is." Silence filled the room. Then Whitlock spoke again, carefully. "You're suggesting that a respected member of this community—" "I'm suggesting," Helena interrupted softly, "that respect can be used." Whitlock held her gaze. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then something changed, subtle but real. The warmth in his expression cooled, the performance slipping, just slightly. "You have no proof," he said. Helena nodded. "Not yet." Hart stepped forward. "But we do have enough to continue this," he said, formally. Whitlock's eyes flicked to him, then back to Helena. And in that moment, the calm shifted again. Not fear, something else. Annoyance, as if the situation had become inconvenient. Helena saw it clearly now, the same reaction she had noticed earlier. Not concern, not surprise, irritation.
The mask didn't return fully, just enough. Whitlock stood. "If we're done," he said. Hart stepped aside. "For now," he said. Whitlock nodded once, then walked out. Unhurried, controlled, as if nothing had happened. The room stayed quiet after he left. Hart exhaled slowly. "That was him," he said. Helena didn't answer immediately. She folded the note again, carefully. "He didn't deny anything," Hart added. "No," Helena said. "He just stepped around it." "Yes," Hart shook his head. "That's not normal."
Helena looked toward the door. "He's done it before," she said. Hart frowned. "What?" "Stepped around things," Helena said. "Redirected them, shaped them." Hart leaned against the table. "So what now?" Helena stood. "Now," she said, "we don't rush." Hart blinked. "Don't rush?" "If we push too early," Helena said, "he adjusts." Hart nodded slowly. "And if we wait," Helena looked toward the window, toward the park beyond, "we let him believe he still controls the story." Hart followed her gaze.
And then, Helena's voice was quiet, then we see what he does next. That evening, the playground filled again. Children ran, parents talked, the same as before. But something had shifted, not in the town, in Helena. She stood near the edge of the path, watching, not the children, the spaces between them, the edges, the places someone might stand. And for the first time, she understood the full shape of it. Not just a man, not just a crime, but a pattern, a way of being. Watching, waiting, becoming trusted, then using it. Behind her, Hart approached. "Anything?" he asked. Helena didn't look away. Not yet. The wind moved softly through the trees. The fence creaked. The light shifted. And somewhere, just beyond what could be seen, something watched. Helena felt it. Not clearly, not enough, but present. Still and patient. The case wasn't over. Not yet. But the truth was no longer hidden. It had just been believed. Wrong.
End of chapter and end of story. Please like and subscribe to support our channel and to listen to more free audiobooks.